there is a sad truth and reality that comes with college football that doesn't really come with other sports. You don't get it in the NFL, NBA, slightly Major League Baseball. You don't get it in the NHL, professional golf, tennis, whatever the case may be. It just doesn't exist in those sports because they have massive business and corporate interests to make sure that this doesn't happen. But the sad reality of college football is that it has never and probably will never be fair. And that's just the way it is. And you can either deal with that fact or you can't. And I think most people can deal with that fact as long as they don't have to specifically confront it all that often. The problem with that reality is that NIL has made it a reality and brought it to the forefront that some schools are just better off than others. That's all there is to it. Some schools have better facilities, better uniforms, better whatever the case may be because of money. Everybody wants it. Some have it. Some have enough. Some have too much. And some don't have enough. But the reality of this situation is that college football has never and will never be fair because it is a sport built on money, and there is no governing body saying you can only use this much money for whatever the case may be. The NFL, NBA, NHL all have salary caps. They are governed by this is how much you can spend on the guys that make your teams really good. Major League Baseball doesn't, but they're also run and operated as a business. So they're not going to lose money on a deal. The overwhelming majority of college football programs are funded by uber rich, frankly, old white dudes who are looking to make sure that their football programs, their schools, get the publicity, notoriety, whatever the case may be, that leads to their favorite teams being really, really good. So and that model, by the way, is not going to change anytime soon. Throw in the fact that you then couple that with billion-dollar TV deals, and you've got a situation where this business model is not ever going to change, and it's just going to highlight the disparity. But everybody knows that college football isn't fair, whether it's in your own conference or whether you're a Power 5 school versus a Group of 5 school. College football, for the most part, and really, I don't even know for the most part, is the only sport in which the season begins and the overwhelming majority of teams do not have the opportunity to win the championship at the end of the season. If Akron went 12-0 this season, they don't have a chance to win the national championship. Now, they might next year, but this year, barring they went 12-0 and they outscored, they didn't give up a point. You know, you read like every area's got that high. So that the Hornets back in 1968 didn't give up a point all season. If you have that type of season at Akron, even then, I'm not 100% certain that you get into the college football playoff. It's just the way the sport operates. There are the haves and the wannabes. And in some cases, the have-nots. But even in the Power 5 conferences, there are disparities between who's got the money and who doesn't. And those schools then turned that who's got the money and who doesn't into if those schools don't have the money, it means they don't care about football as much as we do. And that's why you should come here. When the reality is some schools are pumping out like teachers and farmers, while other schools are pumping out doctors and engineers and pharmacists and, careers that are a little more lucrative and have a little bit more leeway at the end of the month to donate to the university or become a booster. If you're a teacher's college, good luck having, a new $80 million football facility, because not a whole lot of folks are getting rich quick off of teaching kindergarten. It's just the way the cookie crumbles. But the schools that put their resources into being a really good engineering school and a really good finance school and a really good medical school, eventually they come back around, a really good tech school. You're like, oh, hey, we got some donations coming in. All right. That's just how it works. And so when Mark Stoops, the head coach at the University of Kentucky, and this is kind of the crux of the entire topic today, is during his radio show, they got their asses kicked by Georgia on Saturday. And it's just one of the, Kentucky's not one of those. I talked about it last week when they beat Florida. Kentucky's not supposed to be one of those programs that beats Florida and Tennessee and Georgia in the SEC East. That's not where they're slotted in the hierarchy. And they got beat by Georgia. And this seems like a weird time to ask for NIL money, donations, etc. But Stoops said fans have the right, basically, to complain that Kentucky got their brains beat in. And he said, I just encourage him to donate more, because that's what those dudes are doing. I can promise you, Georgia, they bought some pretty good players. You're allowed to these days. We could use some help. That's what they look like when you have 85 of them. I encourage anybody who is disgruntled to pony up some more. End quote. After getting your ass kicked is a hell of a time to ask for NIL donations. That's quite the interesting strategy there from Mark Stoops. But one, I don't know if there's a great time to ask for donations for NIL, because I also think, too, it's kind of not great to, like, I don't make enough money to donate it to make sure my favorite football team stays good, okay? Like, I'm interested. I watch it every Saturday, love it, consumes a ridiculous portion of my life that it shouldn't. But I can't let it consume, like, any extra $20 I give, I'm going to send to an NIL collective to try to recruit some 18-year-old kid to come to my program. That's where I'm going to draw the line. And I think that's where a lot of people draw the line. So this idea of, like, you can bitch as long as you're donating is like, well, wait a second. But I don't know that there's a great time to ask for NIL money. I don't know that if the idea of, like, if they had beaten Georgia, to ask for money at that time, like, makes sense to me in theory. If people are excited, you want to reward the program, whatever. It might be better to ask when you just got your tail whipped, and you can frame it as, hey, that's what happens when you can buy really good players. And I don't think if Georgia fans or Kirby Smart take issue with that, I think it's misguided. Because to pretend like they don't got dudes, like, for instance, last week, Utah gave every one of their scholarship football players a Dodge Ram truck. You can't ever again complain if somebody's like, well, you bought these kids with trucks. You gave everybody a truck. Like, it's just, you can't deny that. You can't deny that you're really strong into the NIL game. If you succeed and somebody says, well, they're really strong in the NIL game, because still there's kind of this gray area where people treat it as if, essentially, if I say you're doing really well in NIL, that you can read that as they cheating. I don't think that's the case. I think it's just you've put resources and you really care about that aspect of college football, which I think you should. That's where the sport is going, and those who don't adapt die, Clemson. So I don't know if there's a great time to ever ask for NIL donations, whether it's when you got your tail whipped by the number one team in America or not. I don't have that answer. But to pretend as if Mark Stoops is saying that we cheating, I don't think that's it either. I think he's saying, if you want 85 certified dudes that are SEC scholarship worthy and can make an impact, the way we're going to get those guys is through NIL. I think that's the whole point and argument that he's making. And I also think that there's a discussion to be had, and maybe this discussion is tomorrow, of what certifiable and realistic expectations are at certain programs. Because if he were to leave Kentucky, I think they would drop back down dramatically, which shows you the job that he's doing. So you can be angry about the fact that you got your tail whipped and then your head coach is saying, we got our asses kicked because we don't have as much NIL money. Could it come across as sour grapes? Sure. But the reality is the sport has never and will never be fair. And that's just something you've got to deal with. And that goes into your expectations. Can Kentucky compete with Georgia on the football field in a lot of different aspects? No, not really. So sometimes just getting your brains bashed in has to be good enough. And the occasional win over somebody that should beat you, in theory, has to matter and has to be good enough too. But the sport will never be fair from a strictly money perspective. There are going to be programs that have more of it, programs that want more of it, and programs that are never going to have enough of it. That's just the way it is. And if you can't deal with that, then maybe this sport ain't for you, because you're used to the parity of professional sports. But I think this is one of those things that makes college football fun and unique, because it really highlights the underdog story. There's not underdog stories in professional sports, at least from a team aspect. Everybody in the NFL is playing under the same rules, and it's basically whether you're incompetent enough or not to your success level. In college football, what makes those fun storylines is the programs like Duke earlier this year or Louisville this past weekend beating up on Notre Dame, that you got no business being in that situation because the resources are just so drastically different. And I happen to like those stories. I happen to like the drama that unfolds with seeing David take down Goliath when he has no business doing so. That's the fun of it for me, and I hope that's the fun of it for you too. This has been today's episode of the Daily Huddle here on Saturday Glory. Thanks for making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. We certainly appreciate it. If you are watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all of the content from us here at Saturday Glory. If you're listening on the podcast, drop a 5-star review. It goes a really long way in helping out the channel and getting us in front of more college football fans. Back at it tomorrow here on the Daily Huddle, Saturday Glory.